Last July, a few friends and I decided to go camping before school started back up. It wasn't anything crazy, just a small campground a couple hours away from home. There were maybe 20 campsites scattered around the lake, with woods stretching for miles behind them. My friends left early Sunday morning because one of them had work. I stayed behind. I figured I'd enjoy one more night alone before packing up. Looking back, that was the worst decision I've ever made. Around noon, I noticed an older man walking slowly behind the campsites. He wasn't carrying fishing gear, no cooler, no backpack. Just an old pair of jeans, a faded gray hoodie, even though it was almost 90 degrees, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He wasn't talking to anyone, he was just looking. Every campsite he passed, he'd stop for a few seconds and stare. Then he'd keep walking. Eventually he reached mine. He smiled. "You here by yourself?" Something about the way he asked me made me feel uncomfortable. I lied. "No, my friends are hiking." He nodded without saying anything else. Then he walked away. I watched him disappear into the trees. I figured that was the end of it. It wasn't. At around sunset, I headed down to the lake to fish. There weren't many people left. Most families had already packed up for the weekend. I stayed until it got dark before walking back toward my campsite. That's when I froze. Someone had moved my camping chair. I knew exactly where I left it. Now it was facing the woods. At first I blamed the wind, until I noticed something else. My cooler had been opened. Nothing was missing, but the lid was still unlocked. I was positive I'd closed it before leaving. I suddenly remembered the man asking if I was alone. For the first time all day, I locked my truck. Around 10 p.m., I climbed into my tent. The campground had gone completely quiet. No kids laughing, no music, just insects and the occasional splash from the lake. I eventually fell asleep. Then crunch. I opened my eyes. Another crunch. Leaves. Right outside my tent. I stayed perfectly still. The footsteps circled my campsite once, then stopped. I could hear someone breathing. Not loudly. Just enough to know that they were standing a few feet away. I reached for my flashlight. Before I could turn it on, a voice spoke. "I thought you said your friends were hiking." Every hair in my body stood up. He knew I lied. I didn't answer. I grabbed my truck keys instead. The panic button was my only idea. The moment I pressed it, the horn exploded through the campground. The footsteps took off running. I heard branches snapping into the woods. I didn't even bother looking. I threw everything into my truck and drove it straight into the campground office. The ranger searched my campsite with another employee. They didn't find anyone. The next morning, while I was packing the rest of my gear, the ranger asked me one question. "Did the man say anything else?" I told him exactly what happened. His face changed immediately. He walked inside without another word. A few minutes later, he came out holding an old photo. It was the same man, same hoodie, same baseball cap. I told him that was definitely him. The ranger stared at the photo for a couple of seconds before saying something else. The ranger stared at the picture for a long time before saying something I'll never forget. "That's impossible." I asked why. He quietly replied, "That camper disappeared here 3 summers ago. They never found him." I laughed because I thought he was messing with me. He didn't laugh back. As I drove out the campground, I looked in my rearview mirror one last time. Standing beside my now empty campsite was a man in a gray hoodie watching me leave. I used to deliver food late at night, and for the most part, it was one of the easiest jobs I ever had. Most deliveries were boring. I would drop off the food, say thanks, and leave. But one delivery changed the way I think about being home alone at night. This happened about 2 years ago when I was 20. I was working for a local pizza place that stayed open until 2 a.m. Most of the drivers hated late shifts, but I actually preferred them because the roads were empty and I could make more money. One Friday night, around 1:20 a.m., I got an order going to an older neighborhood on the edge of town. The address seemed normal. The only weird thing was a note attached to the order. It said, "Please leave the food at the door. Do not knock." I didn't think much of it. Some people just didn't like answering the door late at night. When I arrived, the house looked completely dark. No lights, No cars, nothing. I walked up to the front door, placed the food down, and took a picture like we were required to do. As I turned around, I heard someone whisper my name. Jason. I froze. I slowly turned around, expecting to see someone standing behind the door. Nobody was there. I looked around the yard. Nothing. I got back into my car and immediately locked the doors. I sat there for a few seconds trying to convince myself I was tired and imagined it. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from the customer. Thank you for bringing it. I stared at the message because I never gave them my name. My name wasn't on my delivery profile. I drove away as fast as I could. About 10 minutes later, my manager called me. He asked if I had to just deliver to that address. I said yes. Then he got quiet. He told me that that house had been empty for about 6 months. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He said the order came through under a random name, and when they called the number attached to it, nobody answered. I immediately checked the app. The order was gone. The customer profile didn't exist anymore. I went back the next morning with my manager because we thought that maybe there was a mistake. The house was still empty. The windows were covered. The front door was locked. But when we looked near the porch, there was something sitting there. The pizza box. The one I had delivered. Still unopened. The receipt was attached. And written across the top in pen were 4 words. Thank you for coming back. I quit that job a few days later. I still don't know who placed that order. But sometimes I wonder if someone was actually inside the house. Or if someone wanted me to think that they were. I didn't believe my dad when he said he kept hearing footsteps above the ceiling. I told him it was probably the house settling. Looking back, I wish I had taken him seriously. This happened last summer. My parents went out of town for a few days. It was just me and my younger brother at home. The first night was completely normal. We played video games until almost 2 in the morning. Right before I went to bed, I heard a loud thump above my room. I stopped walking, looked at the ceiling, then it happened again. Just one loud thud. I figured it was probably a squirrel, so I ignored it. The next morning, I asked my brother if he heard anything. He looked at me for a second, then asked, "You heard it too?" Apparently he'd been hearing noises almost every night. He just didn't want to tell me because he thought I'd laugh. That night, the noises came back. Only this time, they sounded different. It wasn't scratching. It sounded like footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Like someone was trying not to be heard. I texted my dad. He replied almost immediately, "Don't go into the attic." I asked him why. His next message made my stomach drop. I've been hearing them too. The next afternoon, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So while my brother was downstairs, I grabbed a flashlight, pulled down the attic ladder, and climbed up. The attic was almost completely dark. Old boxes, Christmas decorations, dust everywhere. At first, everything looked normal. Then I noticed something. One of the boxes had been moved. I knew it had, because my dad always kept everything stacked perfectly. Behind the boxes was a small space, just big enough for someone to sit. There was an old blanket, empty water bottles, food wrappers, and a flashlight. Someone had been living up there. I climbed down so fast I almost fell. I called my dad. He told me to leave the house immediately, then call the police. When the officers arrived, they searched the attic. About 15 minutes later, one of them climbed back down. He asked, "Has anything around the house seemed different lately?" I told him no. Then my brother spoke up. "My food keeps disappearing." Neither of us laughed. The police searched the rest of the attic. They found something else. A small notebook. Inside were pages describing our daily routine. What time we woke up, when we left the house, when we went to sleep. Someone had been watching us for weeks. But the last page was the one that still bothers me. There was only one sentence. "I don't think they've noticed me yet." The police never found the person. They believed whoever had been staying there escaped while we waited outside. We moved months later. Sometimes, I randomly think about that notebook, because of the last entry said, "I don't think they've noticed me yet." Then whoever wrote it was still inside the attic while I was reading the pages they left behind.